In the stormy journey of Vietnam's 20th century history, there were those who did not take up arms on the battlefield, yet became indomitable warriors on the fronts of politics, diplomacy, and justice. Among them, Nguyen Thi Binh, a petite woman with a calm appearance but a will of steel, etched her name into history as a symbol of intellect, courage, and unwavering patriotism. She was the first Vietnamese woman to sign an international peace agreement, the Paris Peace Accords of 1973, which ended the war and restored peace to Vietnam. But that was not all. Her life is a silent yet heroic epic of a revolutionary woman from her youth, an outstanding diplomat, a spiritual mother of education, and a quiet but enduring flame in the hearts of generations of Vietnamese people. Nguyen Thi Binh, not just a historical name, but a living value, a shining example of morality and human dignity, commanding deep respect whenever her name is mentioned. Roots of a lifetime of struggle. Born in the heart of Saigon on May 26, 1927, Nguyen Thi Binh carried within her two precious legacies. First, the patriotic intellectual lineage of her family. She was the granddaughter of Phan Chu Trinh, a great revolutionary figure of the early 20th century. And second, an early awakening to the pain of a lost nation and a deep yearning to contribute to the country's future. Her childhood was not as peaceful as that of many others of her time. Growing up during the French colonial rule, witnessing injustice, oppression, and hardship, she soon realized that her path could not be one of compromise. From a young age, the girl named Nguyen Cho Sa, her birth name, was exposed to revolutionary thought through books, secret discussions, and the lasting influence of her grandfather. It was the ideal of enlightening the people, strengthening national spirit, and improving livelihoods, the very vision Phan Chu Trinh had ignited in a whole generation. At just 18, in the midst of a city ablaze with patriotic fervor, she joined the National Salvation Women's Association, beginning a journey of unwavering commitment to the ideals of independence and justice. Rather than choosing a life of comfort afforded by her well-off family, she threw herself into underground activities. Spreading revolutionary messages, organizing protests, writing pamphlets, all acts that risked her freedom and even her life. In 1951, Nguyen Thi Binh officially became a member of the Vietnam Workers' Party, a sacred milestone for a young woman with steadfast ideals. She not only proved her firm political resolve, but also demonstrated a leadership style that was calm, thoughtful, and humane, traits that later became her unique hallmark. Unlike many leaders known for their battlefield prominence, Nguyen Thi Binh emerged from another front, one of words, reasoning, diplomacy, and political consciousness. Yet it was precisely there that she shone in her own distinct way, a female fighter without a gun, yet carrying the flame of resistance in every word, every gaze, and every dignified step she took on the international stage. In the early years of her revolutionary involvement, she was arrested and imprisoned by the enemy for organizing resistance. But prison could not break her iron will. It was in those dark places that Nguyen Thi Binh honed her strength, nurtured her faith, and prepared herself for the exceptional role she would later take on as the face of Vietnam at some of the most important international forums of the 20th century. It must also be emphasized that in a society where family roles and gender were heavily imposed, choosing the revolutionary path was not merely a personal decision, but a renunciation of comfort and a sacrifice of personal happiness for the sake of national well-being. In that very journey, Nguyen Thi Binh not only represented the modern Vietnamese woman, but also became a voice for the highest ideals: peace, human rights, and national pride. The woman who signed for peace. If every nation has a diplomatic figure who brings honor to their homeland, then for Vietnam, in the midst of its fiercest war, the name Nguyen Thi Binh stands as such a symbol. In the late 1960s, as the battlefield in Vietnam grew increasingly brutal, where blood and tears blended with the roar of bombs, on the diplomatic front, a petite woman with a calm demeanor and eyes bright with conviction represented the Provisional Revolutionary Government of the Republic of South Vietnam at the historic negotiation table in Paris. At that time, she held the position of Minister of Foreign Affairs, and more importantly, was the head of the negotiation delegation, carrying not only political responsibility, but also the fate of millions of Vietnamese lives yearning for true peace. Beginning in 1968, for over 4 years, the Paris Conference became one of the most challenging and complex international negotiations of the 20th century. There, amidst immense political pressure, strategic calculations, and the presence of major powers such as the United States, China, and the Soviet Union, Nguyen Thi Binh emerged as a warrior of intellect. She spoke fluent French, argued clearly, firm yet gentle. More than once, international reporters captured images of her sitting composed, calmly engaging with seasoned diplomats like Henry Kissinger, leaving many astonished. They could not comprehend. How could a woman from a war-torn country speak with such poise and strength? The answer is this. Nguyen Thi Binh did not merely represent a government. She was the voice of an entire nation, demanding the right to live, to self-determination, and to human dignity. On January 27, 1973, in Paris, 4 parties officially signed the agreement on ending the war and restoring peace in Vietnam. In that historic moment, Nguyen Thi Binh, with her traditional áo đai and solemn expression, signed the peace agreement on behalf of South Vietnam. That image, a Vietnamese woman signing a global peace accord, not only entered the history books, but also touched the hearts of millions around the world. She did not need to shout, did not seek attention. With only a calm gaze and measured words, she compelled great powers to listen and recognize Vietnam's just voice. Looking back, one sees that behind such strength was a spirit forged in prison, shaped through years of underground resistance, political vision, and above all, a heart deeply devoted to peace and national independence. Nguyen Thi Binh, a woman who did not carry weapons but helped silence the bombs. A person who did not chant slogans, yet whose every word carried the weight of sacrifice and national conviction. Upon returning from Paris, she did not become a media figure, nor did she bask in fame. She chose to continue serving quietly, just as she had begun, patiently, persistently, and full of compassion, from the negotiating table to the People's Forum. After peace was restored, the country entered a new chapter, one of healing the wounds of war and rebuilding from the ashes of history. And at the heart of this immense undertaking, Nguyen Thi Binh, the woman who once signed for peace on behalf of the nation, continued to take on important roles, not through fame, but through responsibility, intellect, and a quiet love for her country. The heart of a mother in education. After national reunification, Nguyen Thi Binh held various positions within the government. Notably, from 1982 to 1986, she served as Minister of Education, a role that was not flashy but profoundly foundational to national development. She approached education not as a technocrat, but as a mother caring for the future of every child. In the post-war era, amidst countless difficulties and challenges in the education system, she advocated for a reform in educational thinking, emphasized the role of teachers, and focused especially on civic education, patriotism, and the spirit of self-reliance for the new generation. She once said, "If war stole the childhood of many generations, then education must be the place to return to them a true future." From that perspective, education was not just about knowledge, but about character, about how people live with kindness and responsibility toward each other and the nation. 2 terms as vice president, 1992 to 2002. In 1992, Nguyen Thi Binh was elected vice president of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam and held the position until 2002. During her 2 terms, she represented the state in many important diplomatic events, while remaining deeply involved in social work, education, and issues concerning women and children. She was not just a political leader, but a listener. She traveled extensively, reaching remote areas to hear the voices of the people, poor women, children without schools. For her, leadership was not about commanding from above, but about empathy and personal engagement. In the eyes of the people, Nguyen Thi Binh was not a government official, but simply Madam Binh, a woman who was approachable, modest, and full of compassion. She was beloved for her integrity, sincerity, warm smile, and her respectful bow to every human life. Choosing a quiet path beyond the spotlight. After retiring from office, she continued her dedication to social work, serving as chairwoman of the Vietnam Peace and Development Foundation, actively supporting children, women, and victims of Agent Orange. Even in her old age, she never rested, as if each day of life was another day to serve. She particularly cared about preserving the memory of war as a reminder to younger generations of the value of peace. She often met with students, engaged in open dialogue, and inspired through her own story, not to be admired, but to awaken a sense of civic responsibility in every young person. In Nguyen Thi Binh, there was no glitter of power. There was only the light of a loyal, steadfast soul devoted to the people. Whether standing in the halls of the Paris peace talks or walking down a red dirt path in the Central Highlands, she carried the same calm posture, steady gaze, and gentle smile. A woman whose every step was a mark of history, and whose every word wove a thread into the fabric of national identity, the legacy of a great soul. The life of Nguyen Thi Binh was a quiet yet radiant journey, not marked by slogans or titles, but by the enduring values she silently and steadfastly left in the heart of the nation. When people speak of her legacy, they do not think only of her positions, achievements, or historical roles, but more importantly, of her character, her spirit, and the message she left for the future, the flame of peace never extinguished. In an era where bombs and bullets were considered the language of power, Nguyen Thi Binh stood as living proof of the strength of reason and righteous dialogue. She did not shout from the podium, nor did she trade principles for compromise, yet she made the world listen to Vietnam's voice. To her, peace was not simply the end of war. It was the building of a just, compassionate society, one that forgives and walks together through the ruins. It was a kind of peace not written on paper, but embodied in each person who could live a meaningful life after the war. To this day, when people mention her, they still refer to her with deep respect. The woman who signed for peace. But what lies behind the peace agreement? A lifetime of choosing to sacrifice personal safety to speak on behalf of a nation, and choosing humility to preserve that legacy long after. Humanist thought and the desire for enlightenment. In every speech and every conversation with the younger generation, she always returned to what seemed like a simple truth. To develop, start with the human being. If we want the country to avoid repeating its painful past, we must teach the next generation to cherish peace. Nguyen Thi Binh's thinking was not lofty or abstract. It was drawn from reality, from prison, from war, and from life itself. She understood that education, ethics, and a spirit of openness were essential foundations for a sustainable society. That is why she always supported progressive thinking, academic freedom, gender equality, human rights, and protection of the vulnerable. These were not slogans. They were the things she lived, practiced, and upheld throughout her life, a moral exemplar and a model of the modern Vietnamese woman. Nguyen Thi Binh was one of the iconic representations of 20th century Vietnamese women. Gentle yet resilient, humble yet profound, quiet yet full of influence. In a time when women were often overshadowed by gender bias, she stood firm, not only among the ranks of leaders, but also in the hearts of countless Vietnamese people. Her image in a traditional áo dai amidst the flames of Paris, her image walking along the red dirt roads of the Central Highlands, her image sitting and speaking with students in a mountainous school, all formed an epic of kindness, devotion, and selfless patriotism. A woman of the people. Today, as her hair has turned completely white and she chooses to live simply and quietly behind the scenes of life, Nguyen Thi Binh's name shines even more brightly in the soul of the nation. Because people understand. There are those who shine brighter the more silent they are. There are contributions that live forever in the memory of the people, without needing golden plaques. The greatest legacy she left does not reside in traditional halls or archives, but in the eyes of today's youth, who are able to live in peace, go to school, speak their minds, and dream of a strong, compassionate, and rising Vietnam, just as she always hoped. Works and writings, the voice of conscience through memoir pages. Not only a vivid witness to modern Vietnamese history, Nguyen Thi Binh was also a gifted storyteller. Through every page she wrote, readers could not only retrace the nation's historical journey, but also feel the depth of her soul, the quiet resonance of wisdom, and the deeply humanistic spirit embedded in every memory. Family, Friends, and Country, 2006. This is Nguyen Thi Bing's most profound and comprehensive memoir, a rare historical humanistic work written in a voice that is both simple and intellectually rich. In this book, she recounts the major stages of her life. From her childhood in Saigon, growing up under the influence of her great-grandfather Phan Chu Trinh, to her revolutionary youth, times of imprisonment, clandestine activities, and the journey to the historic Paris peace talks. However, the book goes beyond personal storytelling. Behind each memory lies a clear ideological framework about educating people, the value of clear-eyed patriotism, and a deep faith in peace, equality, and sustainable development. She wrote not to glorify herself, but to preserve memory as a debt to the people, to those who fell, whose names are no longer remembered. Many readers, from veteran officials to young students, have described it as a book that awakens love for the country through a rare kind of honesty and gentleness. Unforgettable memories. If family, friends, and country is a grand symphony, then Unforgettable Memories is like a delicate chamber piece focusing on specific moments, particularly during the Paris Peace Accords negotiations, when she became the face of South Vietnam before the world. This book recounts behind-the-scenes stories, challenging diplomatic meetings, and her inner thoughts while facing historic decisions. Readers will encounter Nguyen Thi Binh, who is not only a strong-willed diplomat, but also a woman with a deeply emotional heart. When confronted with the pain of war, the bodies of innocent civilians, and the burning hope for true peace. She recalls the silent moments in Paris, the sleepless nights after tense meetings, and the deep emotion she felt when signing a document that millions were counting on. The book is not filled with rhetoric, but it carries the weight of a condemnation of war and a prayer for humanity. Presence in international works. Beyond being an author, Nguyen Thi Binh has also become a symbolic figure frequently referenced in international academic works on the Vietnam War, peace movements, and the role of women in global politics. She emerged as a rare icon of Eastern intellect within Western diplomatic circles, a woman who didn't need to speak loudly, yet compelled world powers to listen. Her name appears in works such as Vietnam, The 10,000-Day War, Michael McClare, Fire in the Lake, Francis Fitzgerald, reports and studies by the UN and UNESCO on women, peace, and sustainable development. Through every page and every memory, Nguyen Thi Binh didn't write to embellish the past, but to plant a seed of awareness for the future. It is a message to the younger generation that freedom does not come by luck. Peace is not a gift. Every value is earned through intellect, courage, and relentless kindness. And if someone were to ask, what is the greatest legacy she left behind? The answer would be her ideas, quiet yet eternal, woven into every word she wrote. Honors and recognition, a woman imprinted in the national consciousness. The life of Nguyen Thi Binh is not only recorded in golden pages of history, but also deeply etched in the memory of the people, in national symbols, and in the gratitude of generations. The honors she received are not merely acknowledgments of her achievements, but tributes to a great character, a woman whose ideals transcended her time. The Ho Chi Minh Order, a noble honor of the nation. Among Vietnam's system of national awards, the Ho Chi Minh Order is one of the highest distinctions bestowed upon individuals with exceptionally outstanding contributions to the revolutionary cause and to the defense and development of the nation. Nguyen Thi Binh was awarded the Ho Chi Minh Order not only for representing peace, but for helping to change the course of an entire nation's history, with perseverance, humility, and intellect. That medal is not only pinned to her chest, it also resides in the hearts of millions of Vietnamese people. Her name lives on through future generations. As a message of virtue and noble ideals, Nguyen Thi Binh's name has been chosen for schools, streets, and cultural institutions across the country. Primary and secondary schools named after her are not only places of learning, but of nurturing patriotism, kindness, and self-respect in the younger generation. Streets that bear her name are more than just roads. They are living symbols of continuity, where today's footsteps move forward on the foundations carefully laid by earlier generations. Naming her in public spaces is how society expresses reverence for a moral exemplar and a commitment to the future, to always cherish the values of peace, justice, and humanity. Her image appears in textbooks, documentaries, and national archives. From pages of history textbooks to documentaries broadcast on national television, Nguyen Thi Binh is portrayed as a model of the modern Vietnamese woman, embodying the beauty of political intellect, diplomatic resolve, and a compassionate soul. The image of her in traditional Áo Đài signing the 1973 Paris Peace Accords is a moment replayed over and over in historical films. Modern Vietnamese history books dedicate respectful sections to her role as a diplomat, educator, and pioneering female leader. Not only students, but generations of intellectuals, researchers, and even international readers interested in Vietnamese history encounter her as a vital chapter of the 20th century, an embodiment of Vietnam's resilience, aspiration, and humanity. A quieter form of recognition, the people's respect. But perhaps the greatest honor does not lie in titles or plaques, but in the eyes of the people when her name is mentioned. She is affectionately and respectfully known as Madame Binh of Paris, the diplomat of peace, or most simply, the people's Binh. In the heart of the nation, Nguyen Thi Binh does not need a statue. She has become a spiritual monument, one that does not need to stand tall to be seen, for she already stands firm in the soul of generations, a lifetime, a national symbol. Nguyen Thi Binh is the quintessential Vietnamese woman of the 20th century, a national heroine who emerged during one of the most turbulent times in the country's history, when Vietnam needed those brave enough to stand up, not just with physical strength, but with intellect, heart, and the spirit of the land's most virtuous sons and daughters. In her, people saw a remarkable blend of gentleness and resilience, depth and decisiveness, humility and strength, the heart of a woman and the will of a great leader. She never needed to step onto a stage to be honored, because her very life, through every action, every word, every step, was a quiet, powerful epic of heroism and inspiration. Nguyen Thi Binh did not merely sign a peace agreement. She signed her name into the history of modern Vietnam with moral integrity, loyalty to the people, and unwavering faith in justice, education, and humanity. More than a political figure, she is a living symbol of ideals and kindness, a shining role model for generations of Vietnamese women, to live for something greater, to remain compassionate amid turmoil, and to stand tall, even in strong winds. And as time passes and the noise of the era begins to fade, people will forever remember the image of a woman in an Áo Đài, eyes steady with conviction, stepping forward from the heart of the nation, named Nguyen Thi Binh.